Here we are. We are in Derech Hashem, page 28. So the Ramchal explains the difficulty in grasping the concept of Hashem's simplicity, right? That's what we seem to end up. So it says, in truth, this approach is very distant from our grasp and our perceptions. And he says in the notes that we can neither, what he means is that we can neither comprehend it verbally nor can we draw the mental images that would allow us to envision it. We almost have no way of giving it clarity, nor the words with which to explain it. This is because our perception and imagination can grasp only matters that are bound by the limits of nature created by Hashem. For this is what our senses detect, and they convey its image to the mind. And when relating this to created beings, these matters are numerous and divergent. So that is basically what he's saying, is that again we're limited by our by what we can comprehend. It says in 47, the understanding of any living being is limited to its realm of experience. As humans, we can fully comprehend only the physical world at best. We can only develop an abstract understanding of the spiritual world. And when it comes to Hashem, who created both the physical, spiritual and the physical worlds, we can hardly describe anything about him. So the Ramchal writes that even the spiritual beings cannot be detected through our physical senses. It follows then that we surely cannot detect Hashem through our physical senses. So this would go into all the philosophies of understanding what we can understand. In other words, the people have a problem with spirituality because they can't touch it or feel it. The same thing with God. Many people say, if I can't see God, if I can't touch God, then God doesn't exist. Well, that's a very limited way of looking at things. That would be like saying, if I can't see an atom, then it doesn't exist. And from last I remembered, we can't see an atom. We know it's there mathematically, but from what I'm remembering, and correct me if I'm wrong, we cannot see the atom. Can we see an atom?
Nope.
From what I remember, we cannot, right?
Not with the naked eye.
No, can we see it with a microscope? An atom?
I don't know, but
I know we can see a nucleus, but we can't see an atom. That's too small. From what I remember, it was too small.
You can split them, right?
You can split atoms, but I don't know if we can see them. So, okay. Sorry?
How can you split something you can't see?
It's an interesting question. I can't. I'm a rabbi. I'm not a scientist. So I can't explain that. But it's there's certain things that we cannot see. Like it gets too small for not only the naked eye, but also for our even with our machines. And that's why we know certain things exist only because mathematically they've proven it to exist. Otherwise, we wouldn't know it. But can you imagine if you would hold that if I can't see it, I won't believe it's true? So if that's the case, we don't believe we wouldn't be able to grasp a lot of things. And that's what he's arguing right here. So however, we have already prefaced that the reality of Hashem's existence cannot be grasped. And one should not therefore extrapolate from what is observed regarding the created beings to the Creator, since their factors and the realities are not at all equal, that we should be able to judge from this one, the created being, to this one, the Creator. And he says in 50 that Hashem is not merely a supra-human being. Consequently, one cannot possibly define any aspect of Hashem in human terms. In the Mama Ha'ikarim, the Ramchal adds that even though we do use human terms, again, it's anthropomorphism, when describing Hashem, those are borrowed terms only, since our vocabulary does not allow us to speak in any other manner. But we must take care not to take these terms literally when referring to Hashem. So when the Torah says for example, an outstretched arm, or God became angry, or whatever else, or jealous, whatever terms the Torah is going to be using to describe Hashem, you can't take those terms literally. You have to just take them figuratively, because Hashem is just speaking to us in the language that we'll understand. That's all. This concept solves other problems as well concerning our understanding of Hashem. For example, people ask, if Hashem can create something that He cannot control, attempting to prove that Hashem is limited, but they are mistakenly applying human concepts and terminology where it's not applicable, producing this apparent conundrum. So once I only deal with God using the terms that we have with our limited vocabulary, so then we're going to come up with all these wonderful questions that really don't start, the question doesn't even begin. That's what he's saying. The Ramchal continues to explain how we can describe Hashem's simple perfection, even if we have no way of fully comprehending it. He says, this is among the things that are known through all transmission, as we have mentioned, and can be verified through analytical investigation of the world of nature itself. And here he says in the notes, 53, scientific investigation is useful only in verifying facts already known from our tradition. It cannot be used to initially discover this truth. And that's interesting, because he's saying you can only, in retrospect, understand something about God. You're not going to discover, by using science, you're not going to discover anything. It's only going to be able to explain what is already there. So it's an interesting concept, because when we say they discover things, you would think that they're discovering something that we didn't have before. And he's saying, no, it's not true. It's discovering the methodology. And that's only because, again, is verifying facts already known from tradition. So, you can, by the way, anytime you disagree with him, by all means voice that disagreement. I'm not opposed. If somebody can come up with a good argument, I'm always interested in hearing it. So, let me just start that sentence again, because I'm in the middle of a sentence. So he said, things are known through all transmission, as we mentioned, and can be verified through analytical investigation of the world of nature itself, with its statutes and its laws, for it is not in any way possible that one existing being should not be found who is devoid of all the laws of nature, its statutes and its boundaries, of all absence and shortcoming, and of all multiplicity and composition, and of all association and evaluation, and of all the occurrences that affect creating beings, and who must be the true cause of everything that exists and whatever happens within them. They say that Hirsch had a long sentence. That's so. Let's run on. Okay, so it said in 54, regarding mitzvot, this term statute refers to a mitzvah whose reason is not comprehensible in textual terms. So you have the paraduma, the red heifer, the shatnez is not the commandment not to wear wool and learn them together, while the law is something that can be understood logically, don't murder, and so on and so forth. Perhaps in this context, Ramchal uses statutes, refers to the natural events that cannot be explained by science, while laws refers to the events that can be explained. So this must be so, because otherwise the reality of the beings that we see and their continuity would not be possible. And he says that, again, going down to the notes, so 56, philosophically, one can deduce that there must be one being who transcends all the limitations of the created world and its inhabitants. The Ramchal is thus explaining how Hashem's simple perfection can be verified through analytical investigation. So the Ramchal presents one last principle concerning Hashem, and he says, what one must know further is that this existing being, Hashem, must necessarily be one individual being and not more. And he says, again, that's the notes say that Hashem's existence is an absolute requirement. He's now adding that there can only be one being whose existence is absolutely required. And this means that it is not possible that there be a multiplicity of existing beings whose existence is an intrinsically absolute requirement. So, just finish his words. Rather, one must be found within this absolutely required and perfect state of existence, and if other existing beings will be found, they will only be found because he created them through his will. Thus you have the angels, you have everything else out there. So consequently, they are dependent upon him and do not exist independently. So he says in 59 and then 61. So he says, in Marma Chachma, the Ramchal interprets the Aleinu prayer based on this concept. We say, Hu Elokeinu Einod Emokein Efes L'to, that he is our God and there is no other. That refers to Hashem's oneness. True is our King refers to the absolute nature of his existence, and the part says there is nothing beside him, means that there is no possibility of there being a second being whose existence is absolute. So what he's setting up, and what the Rambam was setting up also, because he's basically copying the Rambam here, was that Hashem is the only existence that is absolute. Everything else comes from Hashem. When we look at something, for instance, ourselves, or even the Malachim, even the angels, should we be able to see whichever level we're looking at? There's I believe there's 7 levels of angels, if I remember correctly. So some of the angels walk amongst us. So when we see an angel with all its limitations, so we can say, oh, so that is extension of Hashem, fine. So now we can extrapolate to what Hashem will be. The answer is absolutely not. You cannot extrapolate from anything we see. We can't say further, except to say that is greater and greater and greater, but still is limiting God by trying to even do that, he's saying. And then 61, the Ramchal cites in Chagiga, it says, upon what does the earth stand? Upon pillars. The pillars upon the waters upon the mountains, the mountains upon the wind upon the storm, and the storm suspended by the arm of Hashem, and so on and so forth. So you see that it goes, just keeps continuing to how we can understand that. And finally, the Ramchal summarizes 6 fundamental principles that we have learned about as follows. It emerges that these primary principles, number 6 in all, and they are as follows. The reality of Hashem's existence, his perfection, the absolute requirement of his existence, his not being dependent upon anything outside of himself, his simplicity, and his oneness. Again, that's the uniqueness that we're talking about. Great. We now understand everything there is to understand that as far as we can about God. So you should now you know that the Hashem is the absolute reality. Fine. So now the Ramchal states Hashem's purpose in creating the world. It's really nice to know that there's God out there. It's very nice to have all these principles, reality of his existence, so on. But nonetheless, we have to discover what's the purpose of creation. Why did Hashem feel necessary to create this world and us? What was the purpose? So the Ramchal states it very nicely. He says the purpose of creation was for Hashem to bestow of his goodness upon others. Period. End. That's the whole purpose of creation. So if you look at 1 and 2, the notes, the Ramchal prefaces his answer to why Hashem created the world with the phrase Ma shenuchal lahasig, with what we are able to understand, because, again, our limited intellect certainly cannot fathom the reasons of the Creator. Rather, the answer is predicated on what Hashem allows us to understand based upon the human intellect. And 2, the explanation here is similarly expressed in Mrs. Yesharim, which is another book that was written by him. Man was created for the sole purpose of delighting in Hashem. Unlike, by the way, I have to say this, unlike in Greek thought, where we were created to be the pawns of the gods, we were there at the pleasure of their gods. We're here to delight in Hashem. It's a real switch. It's a major switch here. The gods aren't having fun with us. They're creating God created us so that we can delight in Hashem. Period. It should be noted that the Ramchal apparently states other reasons for the purpose of creation in some of his other works, And he lists some of them are, explains how all these different facets of the primary goal, which is for Hashem to bestow His goodness upon His creation. So that all we have to really know from the Ramchal right now is that the whole purpose of Hashem creating the world was for Him to bestow His goodness upon others. So now note that He alone is true perfection, devoid of all shortcomings, and no other state of perfection is like His whatsoever. As such, any imaginable perfection other than Hashem's perfection is not true perfection. Rather, it is referred to as perfection relative to something more deficient than it. I remember when I was going for my master's, so we talked about the different level. It was Piaget and ultimately Kohlberg, who came up with his 6 levels of moral behavior. I think that's what they called it. And he's, according to Kohlberg, he said the only person in his mind that ever reached his 6th level of real inner goodness, or whatever that would be the man that everybody was celebrating today, Martin Luther King Jr. That's what he's held that person had reached the highest level of moral development. I don't know about everybody else, but I remember him quoting that one person, that he was the best. And so you look at Martin Luther King Jr., and you say, so he was perfect? And of course, the answer is no. So he wasn't perfect. And that's his point here. We look to somebody and we say, that's just perfect. Well, our statement of perfect is not really perfect. We can always find fault with something, except for Hashem. Hashem's perfection is perfection, and anything after that is not. So, but absolute perfection is only found within the perfection associated with Hashem. Therefore, since Hashem's will is to bestow good upon others, it will not suffice Him to bestow only a small token of amount of goodness. Rather, it will suffice Him only when He is bestowing the ultimate good possible for created beings to receive. Now, this is also an interesting statement. It's only possible for created beings to receive, which means since we are limited, we can't get all of Hashem's goodness. It's going to be an impossibility because we're limited ourselves. So it's only what we're going to be able to be receiving. And so he says in number 7, I think it was. Once we assume that Hashem created the world in order to bestow goodness, it is axiomatic that He should want to bestow the maximum amount of goodness that is possible. Anything less is not absolute goodness. So, and he says, and since Hashem alone is the true good, His desire will be satisfied only when He is benefiting others of that very self-same goodness that is intrinsically part of Himself, goodness that is both perfect and true. Okay? So now it says, the Ramchal explains how it's possible for Hashem to impart of His own goodness to His creation. Yet on the other hand, this good can only be found within Him. And he says in number 8, since by definition only Hashem is absolutely good, anything that He imparts will perforce be less than what He is, less than the ultimate good. Therefore, a way must be found for the creation to benefit from Hashem's goodness in and of itself. The Ramchal explains in what manner Hashem can bestow this ultimate goodness upon His creations. Therefore, the divine wisdom decreed that the reality of this true goodness will be attained by giving the created beings the opportunity to attain a state of devekus, of connection, of cleaving. That's from davak. Derech in Hebrew is glue. Davak is attachment, to attach. So devekut would mean attachment with Him. And so He's giving us, the created beings, the opportunity of the state of attachment, of devekut with Him, as much as they are capable of attaining a state of devekus. Now, what's going to determine what our state of what level of devekus we can do? Some people can only attach themselves to Hashem a little bit. What does it mean to attach oneself to Hashem? What would you say to that?
I don't know. You can't really attach yourself to Hashem.
Why not?
Is he not there?
So if you can't attach yourself, so then Hashem is setting up a system which would doom to failure. Correct?
Yes and no.
Say it again?
Yes and no.
What's the no part? The yes, I understand, because I just said it. The no, I don't get.
You can still somehow attach yourself to God. I don't know how, but it's possible.
So how would you think, if you're going to allow for attachment, tell me how you think you could attach yourself.
Spiritually?
Go ahead, develop that. Develop the thought. It doesn't have to be you, it could be everybody.
Okay.
Come on, kick in.
Oh, I don't know.
Well, what do you think? I'm asking. Again, if I had to think of how I'm going to attach myself to Hashem, how would I do it?
By doing mitzvot.
By doing mitzvot, that's one thing. What's another way to attach yourself to Hashem?
By serving him?
That's mitzvot.
Oh, okay.
So what else?
Just helping others, I guess.
Emulating God. Fine. Emulate
the attributes.
Emulating the attribute. Correct. What's another way of doing it? We have to understand. We have to make this practical. Otherwise, the Ramchal's words just fall in cyberspace. Say it again.
What do we do? Daven?
Daven would be one of the mitzvot, attachment, spiritual. The Rabbi and Rashi says on Chumash to aseh lecha rav, make for yourself a rabbi, attach yourself to the rabbis, because the rabbis are the embodiment of Torah. So that's how you cleave on. You cleave on to the Chachamim. You cleave on to the teachings. Yeah.
Is that where the Christians get it? Like you can only talk to the priest, and the priest will talk to God for you.
You don't know? I have no. I don't know.
That sounds kind of.
I'm not sure. What you mean? They use the priest as the intermediary. That's what you're saying?
Yeah. So it's like talk to the priest, and he'll talk to God.
Oh, wait, it's only Roman Catholic. I don't know. Is it also it's not Greek? So that's only. I think it's only limited to Roman Catholicism.
Yeah.
But the rest of them, I believe, say that they can talk on their own. But I'm not sure. I don't know that much about it. But it'll be an interesting thing to say that. How are you, sir?
It reminds you of the Toman Devorah, with that journey toward crown that
Correct.
you change yourself by all of those processes.
Mm-hmm. And that's what we're talking about. We're talking about
Going to a higher level.
Right. And the only way to do that, though, is to work on those things. So we have to, like we were saying, one is we have to study the Torah. We have to emulate Hashem through our actions. When we're doing that, we're creating this devekus. We're making this attachment. We're on page 36. We're also, by attaching ourselves to the rabbis, we're learning from seeing what they do. Hopefully they're good role models, and we're going to see how they attach themselves, how they make brachot, how they act in normal life, and so on and so forth. That's all part of attaching oneself to Hashem. And he says in number 10, thus, since true perfection and absolute goodness are only found in Hashem, He gives us the opportunity to benefit from that goodness through our devekas, through our attaching ourselves to Him. Any other method of bestowing goodness will fall short of the ultimate good. And Das Tevunot, the Ramchal writes that throughout Nach, there are many verses which demonstrate that the true pleasure of Olam Haba, the world to come, consists of closeness to Hashem. That's why it's interesting when we talk about Olam Haba, you have this imagery of everybody just basking in the light of Hashem. And as Hashem says, we're teaching the class. Well, that is the true pleasure of a Jew. That's what he's saying. The attachment of Hashem, unlike the people who believe they're going to have something else in heaven, whatever they're going to have, Cadillac Coupe de Ville, 70 virgins, whatever it's going to be. It has nothing to do with that. The spiritual world is where we are totally attached to Hashem, and just like as the angels would be attached. Our Bechira goes out the window, our free will goes out the window at that point. As a result of this, although on their own, the state of perfection attributed to Hashem cannot possibly be ascribed to them, even though we've attached ourselves, we don't become perfect. Nevertheless, on the basis of their attachment, of attaining a state of devekus with Him, to the degree that this perfection can be ascribed to them, it will be attained by them, and by virtue of their attaining a state of devekus with Hashem. So if we want to perfect ourselves, it's not a matter of going to a morals class and trying to figure out what would be morally correct according to our moral gurus of the day. Rather, it's a matter of just attaching ourselves to Hashem, and that way we perfect our behavior and perfect ourselves as much as we are able. Never going to attain the perfection that Hashem has, because Hashem is perfect by His very essence. We, on the other hand, are not. We have a lot of things against us that way. Consequently, they will find themselves benefiting from the true goodness as much as is possible for them to benefit from it. So he says in 11 and 12, although even when attaching oneself to Hashem, one certainly does not reach the same level of perfection and goodness as Hashem Himself, one can nevertheless be said to have reached the ultimate good, since the goodness is derived from Hashem and is the most that any created being can achieve. In Mesilas Yesharim, the Ramchal writes in Tehillim, cites the verse in Tehillim in Psalms. It says, "But as for me, closeness to my God is my good." That was written by King David. So as evidence that the true perfection and good can be achieved only by attaining a state of devekus with Hashem. Again, the attachment to Hashem is the main thrust of where he's going from. So he sums it up and he says, as such, Hashem's purpose in the creation that he created was to create a being, namely the human, who will benefit from the goodness of Hashem in a manner that is most suitable for him to benefit. And now the Ramchal is so far so good. Any questions on that?
Almost like what we were studying this morning with the Simcha.
Right, Simcha Shal Mitzvah. Correct.
This brings goodness but true joy.
Correct. Because, and that true joy, like I said this morning, is the attachment to Hashem. And that's why a person, the more they have this true devekus, this true attachment, the less depressed they become. The less sad, less angry. They become just a happy person because they understand that everything is for the best. That's one thing, but they also understand that they are attaching themselves to the ultimate, to the Creator. And what better thing could you ask for? It's unlike who was I talking to? We were talking today about people who have money or something, and I forget what it was. Somebody had money and they needed something else. They had to go through something else. The point was that no matter how much money they had, they always were looking for something else, and they didn't understand that what they're really looking for is this connection to Hashem. It was an empty existence. I wish I would remember what the argument was, but it was real proof of that, because they.
It was a thing like you get a D and then you get an E and then an F, or I don't know how school grade works.
No, it goes the other way. A is the best.
Okay.
E does not mean excellent. E means
F does not mean fine.
F does not mean fine, and D does not mean dandy. A is the best. B, A, and B, and as we go down, it gets worse. A, B, C, D, F. So if you get an F, that means you're repeating your grade.
This was something we discussed today, but that predicament is the more you get, the more you want.
Right.
It's endless.
Correct.
In the secular world.
And
it's always your dream today will be your depression and dissatisfaction tomorrow.
Because the rabbis say nobody ever died satisfied with what they had. Their hands were never open. They always closed their hands. I want more. I want to take it with me. So it's that's just the way it is. What you want to say? They don't. It was symbolic. I'm sure that people have their hands open. Don't worry about it.
There are plenty who do, yes.
Yes. But most people don't want to. They say, if I could only have done this, to go ahead more. So nobody's really happy with the money they've amassed. It's only half of what they wanted.
But money buys you the time to develop spiritually sometimes.
No,
Sometimes-
absolutely not.
Sometimes it does. If you have it and it's on autopilot and you don't spend every waking minute devoted to attaining that or amassing more wealth, and besides, after today, it's no big deal. There's no reason to pursue wealth.
Okay, I don't want to get into politics.
Okay. But
I knew there was a political statement coming in. I want to say I'm that. But what I'm saying is, I just want to argue that for a second to say that I don't need money to attain my attachment to Hashem. All I need to do is realize that there's a God out there, and if I understand what's going on, that Hashem only wants me to benefit from His goodness. Then, by following the mitzvot, again, by doing all these different ways of attack, by emulating God's characteristics that we know from the Torah, that is what causes the attachment. Not how much money I have, and that's why you have some dirt poor people out there, Jews, who are happy. They have simchas chayim. They are the happiest people you'd ever meet. And you look and say, "Are you crazy? You're living in poverty." But I'm so happy. I have this derech to Hashem. Am I saying that's what we should strive for? No, I'm not saying we should strive for that either. But I'll get to in seconds. But their derech to Hashem, their attachment to Hashem, is what allows them, even in their squalor, to be happy. So it's not a matter of if I had money, I could strengthen my spiritual resolve. I think it has nothing to do with that. If God gives us some money, that's great. If God doesn't, that's never. He shouldn't curse us that way. But it's nonetheless, if I understand that it's coming, that the goodness is there, and I'm getting all that goodness again. So that's what that's what the Ramchal is trying to do. Now I don't know if the Ramchal was rich himself, not rich. I have no idea what financial status he was at. Yeah, go ahead.
Being rich is only a state of mind.
Okay, there you go. All right. Who is rich wants happiness a lot, 100%.
What we were discussing this morning, that sometimes what in the secular world looks like a blessing can be a distraction to where you can't focus at all.
Mm-hmm.
Even going to prayers.
Correct.
Your mind is off on other planets.
Mm-hmm. That's 100% true. We've all dealt with those other planets. Okay. So now the Ramchal now explains why Hashem did not create that being with the immediate ability to stay in a status of tevekus with him. This is an important question too. Here it says, the Ramchal tells us, you know why God created us? So that we can gain benefit from His good, that we can gain benefit from the goodness of Hashem. Great. Well, why are you making us work so hard? Just give it to us. No problem. We'll accept it, right? If I were a rich man, I'd be happy. No problem. Would it hurt some eternal plan? I can go through the whole soundtrack here. But really, God, if you want me to feel the goodness, show me your love. Let me hit the mega box. No problem. Show me the money.
It's part of this the eternal struggle between the Yitzhara and the Richa.
Yitzhar Tov, yeah.
To where you have to change that, to where you would think that you just want to be on the Yitzhar Tov side all the time. Why does not give me? Why make me struggle? Just give me. But the changing of the Yitzhara, where you make it into a positive force in your devekas, your connection with God.
Right.
It's like a ladder that we can.
Well, that's what he's going to say actually. So let's just look at 15 because he says it very nicely here. He says, when observing the world, we do not see man or any other being for that matter receiving the ultimate of goodness. Instead, We see a great deal of suffering, evil, and darkness. But we know that the ultimate good will eventually be attained in Olam Haba, in the world to come. So the Ramchal therefore must address why Hashem did not simply place us in that state immediately. In other words, how do all the challenges and misfortunes of this world serve to bestow Hashem's beneficence onto creation? Now we're going to answer that. Okay? This is what the Ramchal's answer is. However, in his wisdom, he decreed that in order for the good to be as perfect as is possible, it is only proper for the beneficiary to be the possessor of that good. This means that the beneficiary should be one who acquires the good on his own, and not one whereby the good is associated with him perchance. This is so because one is typically embarrassed to receive an unearned gift and would much rather earn his reward. Hashem therefore created the world the way we know it so that man can acquire a right to Hashem's benefits. Now, I'm not going to argue constantly with what we see in the papers and everything else, but the way the Ramchal is saying it, and I know this certainly from just the last generation, people did not want the free trip, the free gifts. They wanted to go to work. They didn't want to be beholding to somebody else. Like I said, I'm not going to argue what's today, because today it seems it's the opposite. But in those days, it was clear that people did not want handouts. And that's what he's going with, that people would rather work hard to get what they need, to get what they're going to get, and then they appreciate it. And the truth is, if you see the first generation rich person, the one who had to kill himself to get there, they understand the value of money. Their kids who were born into it's the expression, born with a golden spoon, silver spoon, thank you. They're born with a silver spoon. So those kids do not have the same work ethic. That's number one. They don't even care about how much money is being spent. They don't have that connection because they never had to work like that. They were born with this stuff. So it causes a lessening of where they're coming from, and more than that, it says that if the money doesn't last, because they didn't have the same ethic as the first generation, so they waste their money. And even if they can let's say the father did a really great job, or the parent did a really great job, so then by the third generation, certainly it's not going to be around.
What's that line from Fitzgerald?
Which Fitzgerald?
F. Scott, Daisy, and whatever the guy's name was. We're careless people.
We're careless people?
Yes.
Why?
They were so wealthy, they were careless.
Oh, okay. Well, that's what it is.
In many senses of that word.
Right. By the way, the other place you see this too is in education. I remember when you're giving a test to the kids, so not everybody's on the same level. If there was one teacher I know that made the test for each individual student. Talk about dedication. I don't know if you ever did that. I know I never did that. That's just too much. That's just too much work. Okay, but this guy, I'm sure he's still doing the same thing. He's a great teacher. His name was Rabbi Beaker. I remember he was teaching in Boston. He used to teach in Providence with me. But he literally, for every single child, he made it one master test, and he would say, for you answer this question, if you answer this question. And what was the point? Because he knew what they knew. And if he would have given that test, limited like the smarter of the kids, if you will, using that sort of a system, if he would have said, you only have to answer one, the kid would have been insulted. What do you mean one? I can do more. It's fine that Jimmy can't do that. That's for Jim, but me, I can do it all. So, he had to understand which kid would accept that level. And kids do that. They understand that certain people aren't where they are, but they want to be challenged. The whole point of this classroom is challenge me. Let me give me a decent challenge. Don't don't go over my head, but let me show you what I can do, right? And all the years you were teaching.
One of the greatest concepts in education is extra credit.
Uh-huh.
And you'll have people that'll earn an A 5 times in one class. They never can get enough.
Right. And that's the point
And
he's
they
making.
pull everyone up with them. Oh, can I do that too? Sure, well, I guess. Well,
So that's what he's saying here, that nobody wants this free dinner, as it were. And it's interesting because in the Gemara, it says in this number 18, it says, the path Hashem chose not to use is known as Nahama Dichsufa, the bread of shame. This means that one is embarrassed to receive a handout from another and would much rather earn what he receives. Therefore, for the goodness to be given in as perfect a way as possible, Hashem created man in a manner that would allow him to earn his reward instead of receiving the benefits without effort. Again, this is why Hashem is setting the system up, that we have to work and we have to strive in order to have this attachment to Hashem to appreciate his benefits. Okay?
It's almost that concept of you strive to even earn more than you need so you can give it to others as a mitzvah.
Right. But at the same time, you don't, while you want to make enough that you can give others, because that's tzedakah, and we all have to give tzedakah. His point is the guy on the receiving end doesn't want to be the guy on the receiving end. He'd rather be able to give him a job, which is why the Rambam says the highest level of tzedakah, of charity, of righteousness that you can do, give a job. Either to give him a loan that he can make money. To give him money is not doing him any favors. You're training. Sorry?
Teach a man how to fish. Give him a fish and eat for a day. Teach a man how to fish and eat for his life.
Correct. Same sort of concept. If you don't do that, it's no good. We can give it. And then there's different levels. If he doesn't know who gave it to me, I don't know who got my money. It's also a good level. But nonetheless, that person would feel 1,000 times better if they would be earning it. And it would be interesting to know today, again, with all the headaches that we have, with all the different systems that are in place, the people who never have to be on all these social programs, would they be happier? That would be an interesting question. I don't want to get stuck on it. But the interesting question would be, would they be happier and more productive if we said, you have to, in order to do this, in order to get this, you have to do this? I think they would, personally. And I'm only getting that from what the Gemara says, that people would rather not take from the handouts because they want to feel that they're doing something. By the way, you know what? Where I have a proof of this too was when Roosevelt, who made the fake jobs.
The WPA.
Yeah. When he did that, so
the
people...
The work program.
The work programs, when he said, you go out, you do it, and we'll give you money. A chicken in every pot, or two...
And they learn new skills.
But most people did that, right? Mm-hmm. They went for those programs because people didn't again, that was in those days. I'm not sure what would be today. I'm hoping that the same thing would be today. Okay. Everybody's laughing.
I'm sorry. I heard a Coast Guard captain describe a specific group of people as possessing a strong sense of entitlement.
Oh yeah. Like I said, today you have that problem. I don't know. But even with that sense of entitlement, would people say that I'd rather earn it? So I don't know. It would be an interesting question if it would be put to the general world out there. Who's getting?
You see that every day when somebody offers relatively menial jobs at Costco, and they're going to hire 170 people, and 10,000 show up to apply for the job.
Oh, so then you prove my point.
Yeah, by and large, I think the populace still wants to
Good.
work.
Okay, good. So then I'm happy to hear that.
But there are others with a strong sense of entitlement.
Okay, fine. So the Ramchal elaborates on why this is necessary, and again, you're asking, one can ask why Hashem created man with a sense of embarrassment when receiving handouts, which thereby forces him to receive, force him to earn his reward. Why not create a man in a way that he feels good, just as good about receiving a gift as a hard-earned reward? Why not? She says, note that this method of earning one's reward is referred to as partially resembling as much as is possible Hashem's state of perfection. And he says this is so because Hashem is intrinsically perfect and not as a result of extraneous circumstance. He didn't have to, in other words, he says Hashem did not just happen to perfect himself, rather Hashem is perfect by his very nature. So rather from the aspect of his nature, perfection is absolutely vital to him, and he is perforce devoid of all deficiencies. There cannot exist in anything other than him a reality whose perfection is absolutely vital to it and devoid of all deficiencies. However, to resemble this reality even partially, the created being should be at least the acquirer of a type of perfection, of which the reality of his very nature is not vital to it. And similarly, it should be the one to remove from itself any shortcomings that it may possess. In this way, the created being develops a similarity to the Creator and can therefore be close to Him and partake of His perfection. And just to end this off, he says in 23 to 25, the Ramchal notes that even if man chooses to perfect himself, that perfection will still not be the same as that of Hashem, who is intrinsically perfect. Man can nevertheless achieve closeness to Hashem, as the Ramchal will explain. And he says, even though unlike Hashem, the created being's perfection is not vital to his nature, it will at least, partially resemble Hashem's state of perfection by acquiring what level of perfection it can. And finally, the principle is that only similar things can become close to one another. Therefore, the only way man can attain a state of derech, of attachment with Hashem, is to be somewhat resembling Him. Again, that's through our actions. Man does this by creating his own state of perfection through the trials and the tribulations of this world, thereby acquiring that perfection. In this way, man becomes similar to Hashem, who was the owner of his perfection. This is very important, that when we go through our trials and tribulations and all the good things we have to do, it's only helping us to attach ourselves more to Hashem, because we're realizing, one, that Hashem is the ultimate good, and Hashem only creates us so that it will be better for us, and we just have to attach ourselves to that concept, and then everything does. We start perfecting ourselves by understanding those mechanics. And we'll have to stop there. Any questions? Everybody's cool?